Hey guys, here's the challenge and the critiques for the month of October. The Ghouls and Ghosts was the theme. I'm sorry this is like 3 weeks late. I was a little behind. I tried to contact Adam. He never got back to me. I was waiting on him for 1 to 2 weeks. I just decided to break down and do these myself. So in the future that won't happen again. I will get some member of the community to come on here because it's having more opinions is better than just mine. So take again what I say on these with a grain of salt. I'm going to break this up a little bit differently. I'm going to kind of group them and talk about them in sets. All right, be sure to stay tuned for the end of the video where I announce the next challenge and have the date. So take care. Alright guys, so I feel this is the category that feels the most complete, the most consistently finished, and they'll probably overall require the least amount of changes. So I just kind of group them up and I'll kind of bounce around between them. Starting with you here, Matt. So overall this is great. Thanks for the value structure. Overall, it's very nice. So I would recommend, since we can see the value structure right here so easily, you have a lot of very high impact areas that are in a way kind of competing with each other. See, back here you have a little bit in the background, little noise in the background is here, stuff off into the corner. Well, I do think these are important and worth highlighting. I think kind of pushing them back, at least a little subtly, will help out a lot. So I'm just going to go grab all that and try to select around some of your areas. So see, this is a lot of this is kind of gets a little lost, if not slightly muddy in places. But I do like this. This is certainly on point with the theme, and that's always what I'm most happy about. So I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to try to basically darken a lot of what's kind of going on back there, and in a way remove some of that contrast overall. See, I like that. I want to add, I think thematically going with like a little bit more blue and green, which is something I know I've been saying and will say a lot throughout the entirety here of this critique, because it's very much important. Alright, so I like that. Now what we can do is kind of bring that forward on the in the foreground as well, darken that even further. So what I'm going to do here, same thing, remove more light, remove the contrast back there, just kind of overall, see what I'm doing? I'm darkening and in a way kind of grouping that up just a bit there. And I'm actually going to just erase out, you know, for the most part, most of that. I don't need it. See, we can put a little bit of emphasis here, right, on the light of that character. And so you'd want to sculpt out with very key kind of shapes, you know, where maybe some of that light may be. So since this is kind of more of the spook, I'm going to emphasize that a little bit more. So I like the area of the shadow and stuff, but I continue to push that ever so slightly more. So something maybe a little like that. And then if you wanted to use that area of light to really dictate on the ground or something, perhaps a clearer shape of where, you know, some of that light can be, and that would be kind of play off as a bit of a design element to make these a little bit more readable. So I'm gonna get a little bit of that guy back and then kind of pare that back. So see, a little subtle changes. And I know these are kind of quick and a little brutal. I'm gonna get a little bit of your information, you know, back out here, but not too much. It's good to have it kind of reserved to the back. Now what we could do though is kind of play up a subtle glow to these. So if we're kind of going to that green and greenish blue, that ethereal sort of glow to it, if we hit the right blending mode with these brushes, that could bring out a little bit of a ghosty or ghostly like tone. So see, like I might come around some of these figures like this, see, and make these all a little bit cooler, a little bit more blue, and then focus on the warms and maybe even some of the greens with the what do I call it? Ghouls and ghosts. So the ghouls could be like slightly warmer, and the ghosts, right? They could be certainly a little bit more blue. And then that's a nice way to kind of even separate the two entities. See, just everywhere where these guys are, I'm kind of just making them a little bit more blue. I'm kind of color coding them. He can be, you know, he's kind of working as he is. So see, now it has a little bit more of an aura, a ghost-like aura around it. And that's it. I mean, you could always, you know, up more detail. I know I'm kind of distracting it there, but see, it's like removing some of the noise and kind of putting the emphasis where it's important. It would really help that a lot. This one, fairly similar. I love it. You have a fantastic reference. I don't have too much in the way of that, but I'd almost say you're revealing too much. And I think if you kind of darkened a lot of this, you could really play that up well. So if I go and grab, right, all these back here, basically going to convert that gray to more atmosphere and get a little bit more color in it. I think would serve that, you know, extremely well. Something kind of like that. And now we'll get a little bit of atmosphere coming down there as well. And then we'll work to get some of that light back out like everything. So, you know, gradients. I'm going to go grab some eerie, kind of subtle, cool blue. You know, kind of like a little bit more in lines with that one. I'd say this is too... In this case, I actually think going a little bit more with the blue actually kind of helps that out a lot. See, something kind of like that. And now we can actually direct how dark, you know, that actually looks. So see, something like that would work really good. Now if I actually take this and we actually darken, right, some of those trees right here, right, and just grab those values like that, coming back up to this, we're going to darken those. See, like that, it'll give it almost like the illusion that there's that atmosphere coming on, and then we just apply a little bit of a blend in there to get a little bit more of that subtle effect kind of affecting it all. And so what I do is almost with this, to place the emphasis on this even further, I'd put like a dropped lantern or something on the ground, something where you can hit like a little bit of a, you know, like a little bit of a warmer note of color and value. Right, something like that. This is going to be super quick. Right, but then you can almost vignette and, you know, illuminate the character with a little bit of that warm, you know, torchlight, which would be really cool, I think. Not necessarily be all end all, not by any means, but I think it would you know, would look really, really cool. And this isn't the way to necessarily do it. I'm really just dropping some color in, and it looks like I'm, you know, something like, not like that, but like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how you want to get light up there, but I think something like that will help. And that way it's just kind of getting killing a lot of the grays. You could put emphasis more on atmosphere and texture, and I think that will help your piece as much as it, you know, really needs it. Or if anything, one other minor suggestion would be to just simply scale things back a bit. The action is so intense, we're seeing like so much forest, but if this is actually cropped, like we're just, if you look at what I'm actually chopping out, it's nothing like, it's nothing super important. And see, look how much more of a, you know, and you put up the detail on all this stuff, then that way you can actually get, I never even saw characters back there before, but you could really, you know, emphasize them, you know, if this is the case. If you you know, if you trim, I call it trimming the fat, you could really get some of those colors a bit deeper, have some nice blue accents on them. It'll really pop. Hey, Wood. Mr. Woody. Alright, this is great. You give me a lot of nice reference. I would almost do the same thing that we did before, and that's just kind of getting in there and getting like a little bit more of an ethereal feel on this ghost. You get a little bit more blues where they need to be. See, that's in particular really interesting. Like, that's going a bit of the opposite way where we actually kind of blow that out. And I kind of like that. At least, again, if you do this with a little bit of a texture brush and really do this carefully, you can really finesse, how that looks. But this is a really good finish for you, and I'm overall really happy with it. It looks a lot nicer. You have a lot of nice attention to care to the materials, and I think, for me, what I observe on you, that's kind of where you usually struggle the most. But that's pretty good. Yeah, Woody, this is that's one of your strongest pieces. I don't have too much. I mean, you could always zoom in there and work on the face a little bit, but I mean that's getting to nitpicky level of things. And either way, I think this piece is a sure progression, for you. All right, Anton, this is fantastic. I like a lot of what you're going on here. I would say almost, if anything, to a fault. It's slightly a little too much on the monochromatic side. So what I would do if it was my piece, I would select some of these shadow areas, some of these deep shadow areas in there. Maybe I should even increase and enhance that range ever so much, like something kind of like that. And what I do is actually kind of slightly warm them up a little bit, maybe go into color balance, peeking in little hints of magentas, reds, and yellows. And I mean on this sort of subtle level that I'm doing it here. Like, you have to execute this part extremely delicately so we don't really ruin your color scheme. But I really think it's just a little too flat, dead cold in terms of the color. Alright, so we do that, like so. I think that looks great. Purples are basically going to be your midtones, and then hints of those reds and oranges on a very low saturation will play into your shadows, and then that'll give you, as you have here, these very nice opportunities to play up the cooler ranges and the highlights. So something like this, you're going to select all your highlights, and I'm going to peek in or just add a splash of the cyan, and I think that'll really help even some of those colors pop out just a wee bit. There we go. See, a little bit of difference can go a long way. So what I do here is perhaps add, if these are the ghouls, I would maybe do something with them to, or see, it looks like these ghouls are coming out of the tree, but it looks like there's some dead humans there as well. So I would make it very clear, because some of these actually also look like they're in defensive positions, like they had a last stand against the tree. The messaging gets a little lost in that regard, but by and far, this is, besides that, I think it's very successful. Maybe having like a splash of red on the guy or some blood on the snow. Again, fallen lantern on the snow in this case to show maybe that there was a battle here. Maybe a few weapons poking out will help it out a lot. But overall, very, very good. Not going to beat anything over with that. It's very, very nice. All right, moving along next, from Bijoutor. I can't say her name. I'm sorry. I've got a very raw American tongue here that words just don't exactly slip off my tongue that easily. Bijoutorin. Maybe that's it. This is great. Highly energetic. I would still try to perhaps force in a little bit more of the shapes to read a little bit more. Like, this is reading well, but like if this is where we have like a huge break of these shapes, maybe we can play up that atmospheric, perspective ever so slightly, right? So we'd remove this, we'd remove the guys, right? We want to focus on those backgrounds. All right, so we're gonna remove that, and I'm gonna try to up the overall brightness. My heater may have kicked in. I apologize, but I do need to get through these. So he's starting to push those shapes a little bit, and maybe actually you have greens, there's blues. I think if you can like not overtly go into this purple range that's up top and actually just keep it kind of more tied to the blues, you know, you can put a little bit of a restraint on the colors overall, and I feel like, yeah, I feel like that will help. So you kind of tie it together and see, like, your ships are generally warm, you know, they're kind of coming at us. So if we, like I'm doing here, is just going over in the background and kind of gradating out the ships back there into like more of a blue silhouette, that helps, you know, the overall readability. Now, if you wanted to put some of the highlights, and I don't have a reference for this, so it's gonna look terrible. But I mean, you have, if you like want to imply that there's moonlight somewhere at a frame and you're kind of hitting, you know, some of the water here, you could look up and, you know, have a little bit of an emphasis on that and see the waves with the moonlight on them can be a bit of a nice framing shape. And of course you could have those, you could look at it like this way too, since you have a lot of nice colors on these, but you could also think about like what would it look like if some of that moonlight was actually coming through, you know, some of the sails and hitting, right, parts of, you know, this ship. So what would this look like with, and this is a lazy selection, but it's a nice piece. This is just something for you to entertain anyways, like, you know, what would it look like if there was, this is not a great way to do this, but, right, what would it look like if there was actually like moonlight kind of coming in and affecting, you know, the side of the ship. So again, this is the most crudest way to do it. That's supposed to be some kind of shadow from the mast. Again, I don't know, but it could add a little bit. It makes the structure a little bit more complicated, but it's something maybe that could work. And of course, you could use the highlights in a way back here to vignette, or at least with the sails, you could, you know, vignette some of the sailing shapes, you know, that the moonlight's kind of hitting back there, and it can be more of a graphic element. I would put a little bit more clarity on some of the texture going. It's fine overall, but he is so close. I'd probably just put a little bit more clarity in there. All right, but fantastic. I absolutely love it. Theme's on point. The energy's on point. Very cool, very challenging piece. Hey, and this one I didn't see a name. It just was called Ghouls and Ghosts. So whoever did this, awesome job. I'm not going to have much to say on this. I think it's largely doing what it wants to do very, very well. You know, easy to read, simple setup, on point with the theme. I think having more than one ghost in the scene, I think would have been a little better. Even like, I know you're kind of alluding that there are some in here, but they get so lost into the scene, and this is the brightest thing we look at, and it's like way up in the corner, so almost kind of having like a counterweight to that, having like a small one maybe, you know, about there, and a couple more of these bright ones to make a pattern and a rhythm to kind of tie it all together, I think would work, you know, really, really well. And you know, these could be other, you know, similarly like just kind of reaching through like that and kind of, yeah, doing their thing spiritually, kind of going through some of the trees, creeping on through. I think that would help a lot, since it seems like the ghouls and the ghosts are working together to get the human in that case. This has a very consistent look to it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe depending on who your influences are and what you want to really achieve personally, I would come in here and perhaps try experimenting with a few ways to get a few more like speculars on some of the creature, you know, to kind of really emphasize like how gross it can be. Like, you did a great job with that. I would maybe push that an extra 10-20% across these guys. See, like, really clean shapes like that and everything that you can use to emphasize that. And then again, maybe just tie a little bit of this color over here into some of the background shapes. So like maybe like something like this, or again with the other shape over here, something between like half of you know, these trees or something like that behind this guy. You know, you could brighten up just like 10%, add a little bit more of this other old color kind of just, you know, kind of coming through. And of course, even these guys would have really affect the lights on the trees like you have there. And I think it would work pretty well. Oh, it's a very, very awesome piece. You could have a few hints of like highlights and stuff on, you know, some more of the ground, you know, certain types of leaves and stuff in here. More of like a suggestion than a ready to be all end all for sure. Some more of this nice tealish green grass color in there, and maybe play up something with long types of shadows in here could work as well. But yeah, very good. I'd maybe have like a few sharper jagged sticks and see how they're affecting the light. And then again, you have like, it's like purple versus blue in this case, but I'd carry some of this dark sickly purple for a sky that I really do like, and try to have hints of that carry all the way through. All right, but it's an awesome piece. Love it. Ghoul 1. This is awesome. This is another one I kind of categorized it with these pieces because it is there. It is so close. Right, you can almost taste it. I think this is a piece that would benefit from a few kind of harder points of detail scattered throughout. A lot of it is this very heavily brushed aesthetic, and I like that look. But there's like, you know, just a few instances like where you can suggest maybe like right here, like there's a cluster of these shapes that is in front of the shapes back there, and you know that really just requires, see if I have a brush for it. I may or may not. I think this one does. Right, you kind of pick this color here and, you know, like sharpen the detail in, you know, like a select few spots that can really do it up. So right, you have this ominous light sort of above it all, which I kind of like. It's a very kind of different tonal image from the other ones, and then find like a few of these areas here where you have some very clear and sharp, you know, texture. See something like that, or like this, where you can really feel the light on it, and then that way you can put cast shadows on the bar branches, you know, that are sticking out. Like it'll have like a texture. You can have areas where they stick out, ones that are coming. Same that I just said with the other piece. Right, like that, like that. Little details like that, you know, not just on the trees, but then kind of working for, you know, on the character. See, like, yeah, that's a very nice highlight, but I actually think you could almost make it more scary if you try to group, you know, these shadows all together like this and play, you know, look up for some Frazetta work. Like having a highlight there may actually be true, but if you condense a lot of that down and play up the you know, the shadow shape itself, like I think just simplifying this overall, not like removing detail and getting it sloppy, but just like grouping that all as a shadow, and then doing, you know, similar things, you know, in the grass as well. Like find your darker shadow tones and then get the depth in the grass. I was doing there, like, see, like this piece, right, that's a little bit brighter, so I'd make a selection like this if like the back of that is kind of cool, and yeah, it looks cool, right? It's a cool neutral, so I'd go back there with like a warmer, darker tone, see, like that behind the character. It'll push this area further. Yeah, it helps increase the depth in the image, basically, in various spots. All right, but you know, this is a beautiful image. The foreground looks like a bit the roughest, I would say. I would definitely get a little bit more attention, you know, into there. Not that I'm going to try to do that now, but like having more overlaps and stuff, I think will help it out a lot. But overall, very, very good. I like that cast shadow on the guy, and maybe playing that up, adding more shadows in there, shadows of the trees. You could really increase the drama, in the scene. That could even be like, and again, they're not going to look like this on grass, but that could be a graphic design element in the scene that makes it look very cool. All right, and so with this group, I don't know, they just kind of fit together for me when assessing them. They're kind of on point with the subject matters and the theme. There's enough there to weave a message, but some of the messaging gets a little lost. And then there's just some kind of core structural problems in regards to readability. And I think that's what it mostly is for me. I think it's the lighting. Like if we take mentorship from the other sides by 1, 2, 3. I don't know. The naming conventions is off the chains. Like, you got a lot going on here, right? This is a complex scene with many characters. It's hard to tell because these characters are so different from one another what exactly that narrative is. Because you have basically like a fairly typical young girl. We have someone that looks like 2B from Nier Automata. We have Steve Lichtman and like a Gandalf looking guy, right? So they're all very dynamically different, which is cool in itself, but it's like, what do they have to do with each other in this scenario? Are they all working together? Is he a bad guy hiding in the back? And again, it's kind of coming down to like slightly convoluted messaging in that regard. Like, can you say maybe like the same thing, removing 1, 2, or even 3 of these characters, and then how can you play that up? Yeah, and then what I would do, beyond that is just perhaps grouping the information in regards to some of the lighting. So like, let's say like this could be a shape all back there. You could either go to like a flat dark shape or a little bit more, of a lighter one. Either or. But see, it's kind of just creating a little bit more of a separation of these elements. So see, it goes kind of like gray, and then dark, and then light. Right, a very rigorous sort of structure. Sometimes even having like an out-of-camera ambient light in this type of shot can work to your benefit as well. So if we had some sort of lighting that was subtle enough, that was way off, to the side, if you wanted to really illuminate some of those forms. But then again, you're going to have to, you'd have to darken at least a good amount a lot of some of this other lighting around these characters. Part of the issue with it structurally for me is that a lot of it reads very evenly. Like what if you toned a lot of that down, and then right, you took basically this shape back here, which is the ghoul, right, and you knock all of that back. See, it's like noise on noise on noise. Even if you look at somebody like Frank Frazetta's illustrations, maybe even someone that does like Magic the Gathering art, or like a Donato or Dan Dos Santos, it's all about the grouping of these shapes. So like, see, that's a group, this is a group. I group the background. So see, like, it'd be kind of like softening up all of that back there. So see, like, the faces now read as a shape. And really for you and many people, when it comes to composition and lighting, this is 100% about curating the information that you're presenting to the viewer. I can't stress that enough. So I'd consider the relationship of these characters. I mean, I guess he looks like a spirit now that I look at him, but that's part of the problem, is like, even though now upon closer examination he's a bit spirit-like, the brushwork feels a little unrefined on the skeleton and on the girl, so that it all kind of it doesn't make him stand out as a spirit. So when you're doing the bottom lighting too, remember, if this is like blue and that's going to light everything up blue, you're going to manage all the values in the structure. See, like, this is too bright and warm if there's no lighting whatsoever, on the back of this. So let's say, like, if that's blue, it's going to get a cast shadow on this character. I just want to keep calling it the Nier Automata character. But see, like, all of this on this side of the face, like this whole shape, and that's what I'm doing. I always think in group things of shapes. We can kind of, you know, pare that back, and it would be a lot, you know, basically it's going to look a lot, that's a very ugly representation of it, but that's kind of like at least where the mindset may start to be, and then you can bring it up and have it actually make sense and paint it nicely. So see, then it's like light on dark on light on dark on gray. It's a pattern and it's a rhythm. This similar thing, like that's like a cool design. Like I love this fiend, but I'm not seeing enough. Like I thought these were glyphs on him. I didn't really notice that potentially that these were these ghouls trying to grab, or these ghosts trying to grab that ghoul. I show more. This is 100% of the case to just show a little bit more. And I don't mean like blasting this with like literal light. Put some volumetric atmospheric light. Cinemas do this all the time to light up a dark set to create a little bit more of readability. So let's say like up here, for instance, right? I'm gonna try to put some light into this. Got a different light? No. Yep, something kind of like that. So see if like if it's dark and ambient sort of shot, going with like colors like this can really play it up. Now, if this is the color you're going for, you know, down here, then perhaps switching that tone up just a bit to like a green or yellow up top may actually help that. So let's just play that up, see a little bit more. And now I'm going to grab like a yellowish sort of green and add a little bit of that atmosphere up top. See, like that's very intense. I'm going to make it its own layer to kind of get that across. I kind of like that. A little bit more yellow. No, it's not subtle enough. Something like that would be absolutely fiendish. Pun intended. I like that. You may not, but I really do. Like, so what this will allow you to do is like you can, you know, get the shape of the creature. Sorry, my selections are all off right now because like again I can't really see what the side and stuff of him is actually doing, but we know, right, his shape, right, is something kind of like this. So see, what I'm gonna do is grab his shape. I guess that's his hand. It's hard. I see what's going on. That's coming down there. Right, so we have something like this. Maybe this is the shape of his back. Maybe it's not. I'm gonna give him some spikes, just to make it a little more interesting. And now I'm gonna darken that up. So see it, like it's going to read a little bit more, and we can kind of see we're not filling this with detail and information. No. But we're adding an atmosphere. What sometimes I do in this regard too, sometimes if you want to, I add noise. I add noise to the atmosphere. It's going to look like that, which is very ugly at first. And then I do a bit of a blur. I Gaussian blur that a little bit, so it can kind of add a little bit of that grit. And then if you want to really blend that in and make it even more subtle, because right, this is all about control, we can kind of play that in, so it adds a little bit of noise just in general to the scene, and it, you know, can really help just some of that visual appeal and look of it, because it's all subjective at the end of the day, and this is just right, this is just my opinion on the matter. See, something kind of like that. Actually, I kind of like that distortion, you know, that's going on. Play it like that, just so we see a little bit more. And then, you know, you can play up the ghouls. Like, if these are their arms, definitely, like, get in there. Right? Play these fiends up. However their shape is. I don't know the shape of ghouls, but they're, right, they're super creepy. You make a new layer. I'm gonna go with this blue. Right, play that up. I actually intended that to look way more blue. But yeah, that will take work. But you know, that's my case. You see, we're adding little color notes back there, and it will play much more of a narrative. Now, if you wanted to even go like a little bit lighter, which again wouldn't be the worst thing in this case, like we can grab some subtle sickly green. You can imply a little bit more of where this action is taking place, right? And that's getting, you know, very subtle with it. I'm just trying different things with the lighting. No. Not feeling that. Yeah, I kind of actually like something like that. Either way, I would select him out the same way that I did before, just to bring down that and then get the ghouls, not the ghouls, the spirits to read. But I'd add like tree silhouettes or like a graveyard silhouette in the background. This is, I know, the best selection you guys have ever seen. Pardon me. But so like you'd basically want to sketch out, like let's say if these are ghouls in a graveyard, right? What you could do is basically trace and or not even trace, but like you could show all these graves, you know, in the scene, and that will give it, right, a little bit of context as to like what's kind of happening. Sorry, you guys can hear my baby. This is the chaos I live in, and this is part of the reason why these critiques are 3 weeks late. It is simply tough to find the time disturbance free. So you could keep going back and back, you know, with these and show lots of layers of graves. That could be optional, if that's even what's kind of happening here. I mean, that's up to you, but at least that's kind of, in a way, what I would do to push it. And then I'd actually, and I know it's spending a little bit more time on this one. It's just sometimes I get inspired, so I think that's a good thing. But color dodge, you know, I'd add some kind of sickly, gross yellow moon or some kind of hazy, you know, indication of that, you know, in the background. And, you know, as a result, like even that can be part of the, you know, that graphic design element as a line in the background. Now this is going to be done extremely delicately. I am admittedly not taking the proper care to play that up, but see what I mean? Like you can add a lot to this scene. Simply before, it's just too flat, not enough going on, and I didn't even bring out the spirits. So just some ideas for you to sink your teeth on. Lastly is this, and I'm not going to spend as much time on this one because it's like the same situation. It's clearly you went for a vignetted look, you know, very classic in that approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. But generally for like this type of illustration that we look for in these challenges is something very traditional in that regard, something very you know, that you'd see on Magic the Gathering, that you'd see on Fantasy Flight, that you'd see on even something, you know, like Hearthstone, whatever the kids are playing these days. So I would again show more, right, with the trees. I'd indicate more of that lighting. So if this is frontally lit, like very obviously so, I would have like the light on these trees in the background and basically have that dissipate as it gets further and further. So see, like this would be a very clear indication of that light, and it would also be a fantastic excuse to show he's casting a shadow. And you know, sometimes these trees will cast shadows and stuff onto themselves. And see, that can play up as part of the design, you know, and part of the rhythm of the shot. And you could frame different elements doing that as well. And then it gets just darker and darker. And then again, using some of that atmospheric, you know, perspective to add tension and a little bit of lighting in the scene would just go such a long way with this. I mean, this is one of the creepiest, you know, illustrations I have seen in a very long time. So if that's what you were going for, you sincerely hit the mark. This is a creep fest. I might not sleep right tonight. I like to play these blending modes. Yeah, see, that didn't help. But I want to play that up. And then I come over here and get a little more of that lighting in it, and then you can silhouette some of those shapes a little bit clearly in the foreground. So this is like, and you could warm up. See, like, since this is a warm light source, you kind of have to warm up here a little bit more, maybe, to play that up. And then you could have the shadow from, like, you would show like the shadow of what's it called, like plants and trees even. So right, you could see things like this, and you'll play that up on the characters and everything. I'm trying to add shadows, it's not letting me. But then, so you could be part of that narrative and enriching the scene by not having a shadow cast from the spirit, right? Like, that could be a nice little touch. So there's just a lot here, and I feel like it's basically undercooked and a little under-delivered. But I like the idea. You can paint very well, but it's, yeah, just keep working things. Alright, so today I have gathered these submissions into kind of pieces of art that I think, you know, like there's a lot of nice levels of detail there, but I think there's problems, you know, underneath structurally. At least I would have approached them a bit differently, and they're all very different, again, in that regards. For instance, like this Ghouls and Ghosts here by the lovely Kiko art. Like, again, this is like a great picture in itself. Some nice solid inspiration. I think a lot of them are drawing almost too much, you know, from existing illustrations. I am liking the process, and I think some of these other ones are a little more clarity where you zoom out a bit. But I mean, I like this. I like you know, this is what it is. It's inspiration, but references would actually be something very different. That's where you know, you get your own photos, you get in there, you act it out, and really try to piece it together. So the problem with this is I have trouble understanding the context and the narrative of what's going on here. I don't know if this is a good witch. I don't know if this is a bad witch. I don't know if this witch conjured or sacrificed anything to build up this spirit or this school. Kind of like, I don't know. It's a ghost, I guess. Too many questions. I don't know if this is a good spirit or a bad spirit, for example. And I don't know the relationship between the two. And you'd really need to dive in and think about that level of subtext to really make this a bit clear. And just to kind of show you a similar illustration that I feel kind of ties into this and is a bit more successful as a result. Something like this. So see, it's zoomed out just a bit more, but it really kind of shows us a lot more of that context. You can see like one of those, you know, like the witch's circles. There's a more formal name for that. I can't think of it today. You can see the crows maybe symbolizing some death, you know, around her, you know, some petals. There's just a little bit more information. The outfit of the witch is actually, or the conjurer themselves. I don't know if that's a witch, but there's some, you know, nice kind of cultural cues in the patterning and the design of the outfit. And you could see in the background that there's like a whole little covenant of them hidden in a little cave. So there is some things going on a very sub level. Now you just have to substitute, you know, this ominous smoke for putting a spirit there, and potentially even have a little bit more of a dynamic camera angle, yeah, pivoting it and tilting it a little bit. So that's kind of where I would see something along the lines of this image, and kind of how structurally there's some problems. On top of that, the readability is also an issue, because you have dark trees, right? There's dark trees, there's a plain black cloak, there's a black sort of cauldron of stump. I guess it's a stump. But again, you'd solve that by zooming out a bit. So it's all kind of very flat and graphic in that regard, and you'd want to play up the lighting a little bit. But, you know, overall it's a solid idea, but it needs refinement. Alright, The Visitation by Dog End. The problem with this is I don't know what it's about. Kind of similarly to the last, but the problem is it's like you have this frame, right? This is the composition. And everything in the composition, it's really about both technical and expressive. And that's kind of the problem with it, is because it's really about exhibiting certain bits of information and subjects to the viewer in a very deliberate way. The problem with this is it's so equally detailed. So again, problematically for me, I would say everything's over-rendered, too much emphasis on detail, not enough emphasis on structure. Every bit of the frame here is filled with some sort of object and or detail. Every bit of it. Technically even the forest as well. Background elements. So, right, we have the tarot cards. Right, we have the table, it's 2, we have all these things over here, that's 4, shrunken heads, 5, this ghost spirit gentleman, that's 6, we have heads on a stick, that's 7, we have a doom train submarine, I'm not even sure, 8, and it's in the swamp, that's 9 completely distinctly separate elements that you have going on here. It's like when an author writes their first novel and they want to stick every good idea they've ever had into it. It's one of the most basic mistakes to make, but one many of us do. You want to really pare that back, scale that information back, and present it in a way that it's very deliberate and a little bit more meaningful with the intent of what this scene is about. And because you have so many elements going on in here, I don't know what this is about. I don't know what to look at. I don't know if I'm looking at this bearded lady with a mustache. I don't know if I'm looking at him. I want to look at faces, right? The human wants to look at faces and engage with them in an illustration like this. Face here, face here, face here, face here, face here. There's like literally faces almost on everything. And that's part of the problem. I just don't know where to look. Now, besides that, there's... I didn't know originally if this was like in a room and this was like a wallpaper. There's some depth issues with this as a consequence of that, and it's all about that readability. There's some awkwardness in the choices of the perspective, but structurally, your problem's not in painting, but it's your planning and your execution, I would say, of the idea. A common problem of just going into detail, over-rendering things before really working out and planning the structure. Alright, and next up, Gothic 1 Final. Again, another new name that I see. Guys gotta start putting names. This one's thumbnail too, but at least we know that's made by you, Tony. Alright, and Keelio Art and Dog End. Interesting name. Anyways, that aside, this is an idea where the process and and overall idea, I think, is there. All right, you're using very solid reference. You're using atmospheric references and inspirations as well. You're even building 3D models, which solves a lot of the problems. The beauty with using 3D models is you can really pan things around and choose the most appropriate angle for your shot. The problem I have with this is that, and again, this isn't to say another artist will have the same problem. These are all, I have to keep getting this disclaimer out, these are just my choices and my issues with things. This is really the only shape that I can clearly read, that and the silhouette of the trees. All of this out, particularly when you zoom really far out, you know what I mean? Like too much of it blends together. There's hard to see some nice separation of the various elements. Now these are nice that they light up and they lead us there, but again, you have this ghoul here, but it's like, is he attacking them? Is he part of that? Is, you know, what's his relationship in this setting to that? That's what you want to sell. Maybe even showing like a horde of them coming up from this graveyard, which you only have one grave. Maybe he's a dead relative. Again, I'm not sure. Other parts of the issues with the readability is like you have like a line of trees here, but the line of trees is also kind of in competition with the edge of this cliff, so again, you can't see either. That's part of the problem. So you need to organize your shapes and values. My choice, I'm going to bust out my, because it shouldn't take me long to do this. Like my choice for this shot design would have been something much more dynamic and dramatic. So like your references, I would have gone with something, you know, quite a bit lower. You know, like in frame, like the horizon would either be this low or entirely lower out, so it's out of the composition. And then I'd have, you know, maybe something like, you know, the trees kind of all gangly here. That'd be like, you know, we'd see like how kind of gnarly and interesting they could be. Yeah, they're part of the trees. It's a foreground element, because I'd have basically a behind the shot setting here of like those ghouls just kind of coming out, like 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, and then maybe like 4 or 5. They're staggering there. And then I'd have the castle, you know, which feels much more safer, potentially even more imposing, you know, up on you know, the ledges, you know, something kind of like that. It's way up there. We see it in 3-point perspective, right? So it's very high. There's lots of towers. We get your bridge. Put the bridge element, like, you know, right here. We see it from below. So again, this is a super low res version of this idea, and I'd have that castle kind of going down the back there. So right, we have foreground element, you know, because I like foreground elements. We'll have this castle going in composition all the way back, which again, I'm not really selling the distance on this enough, but you know, it'd be like you have atmosphere and stuff, and this could be a night shot, sure. But this is kind of how I'd frame and shoot, you know, the subject. You could even potentially add part of the castle over here with, like, you know, secondary bridges, the gate and a, you know, gate going out here. I don't know. You got to mix big and, you know, the design of your structure. There's not a problem with that. Maybe even having it going out, but it's kind of like selling it in the setup of it, if that makes sense. Right, so these are the foreground guys. So then you gotta have the lights on, you know, in the place, and see, it's a little more dramatic. It brings us into the world and the scene. Your angle is so, it's so much like an establishing shot where it's just kind of setting stuff up, but it removes us as the viewer from any kind of action and drama. That's kind of, there's very rare instances where establishing shots can also play up the drama. One that does come to mind is that one in Star Wars A New Hope, where the ship just flies over camera, right? It's an establishing shot. You see the little camera in the background. We see the whole setting and immediately plucked into the drama with the ship being chased. And that's a rare instance. Now this one I think is very good, Tony. I like the idea, but this, when you get this close up into a scene, and this is why I rarely go this close in scenes myself, because it's not my strength. But you got it. It's all about the acting and the body language when we see characters this close. They're kind of staring there. This character looks bored. That's the problem, is the acting, right? This character's looking bored, like, oh, I'm just hanging out. This character looks like, not that she's bored, but she's not impressed. Which is a huge disconnect from this fiend that's back here. Even the fiend is looking this way and just like, you know, it's just hanging out. There's not any acting going on between these elements. On top of that, right, they're all kind of facing this way out of the composition, but there's nothing over here to look at. There's nothing over here to bring the viewer's eye back into the frame. So compositionally, for me, there's a lot of issues besides just the acting. I hope that makes sense. Like, I would have had it so, you know, this character here is like shrieking, and the older one is cusping the mouth of the little one, and you can see the eyes just wide, dripping with tears and sweat. Like, you know, it's really about those intense moments. And if you have trouble acting that out or finding that emotion, watch movie scenes. Watch something like A Quiet Place, where their characters are, it's all about acting, because no one speaks in that movie. Things like that, you know, can really do a number. Maybe even something out of, I don't know. But the ghoul itself, again, just everything's just standing statically in the scene, and they need, and it's more appropriate for the characters. But yeah, imagine, like, I've seen a piece like by where is it? By, like, I don't know if I can find it. by like Carla Ortiz, where there is, let me show you acting in like a specter or a ghoul that really feels, just to kind of show you where things are at with that. Okay, here's a bit of an example. I don't know if it's like a specter, but it's getting that motion in the rags, it's getting the acting into the characters. That's what it's about, and that's what your piece is lacking. Alright, and for these next 3 entries, I've kind of grouped them together because I have similar thoughts or opinions on them, and they will vary from one to one. So from Manning here, the problem with this, and I did consulting with some of the other community members, is it's hard to really understand what exactly is going on here. I think if we were to just isolate the idea that there's some kind of ghouls or ghosts coming up to grab this ghoulish guy, right? This guitar playing zombie fiend, which I think is an amazing idea in itself. If you have just like this as an idea, and then you could include the 2 side guys and like make the scene about that and make it very clear, it would be amazing. But the problem is that there's this giant white shape right here that I have no idea what that is. There's tree, again, I think these are trees, but they also kind of look like cavern. There's a lot of things that I'm just too uncertain about to kind of have more of a solid view on that. And I think it's just kind of getting to the question for your own piece, what is this image about? And I would recommend drafting lots and lots of compositions and planning out the structure of those compositions to make that idea absolutely clear so it hits the audience in the head. Because it's just like, I'm not sure what the message is, I'm not sure what the story is going on here. I don't know if this is like a gravestone and they're trying to like play music to raise the ghoul. I don't know, there's too many uncertainties. With these two, it's a little bit of a different story, is that I can see exactly what's going on. This stuff is just too unfinished. You gotta, guys, everybody, if you're gonna submit something, make sure it at least is complete, to the best of your ability. And I know Parrot can do better. This is a rough. I want to see full illustrations. If the full illustration was completed in black and white, that is fine. But this feels much too rough and much too, rushed in that regard. Which, there's no reason for that, because we're critiquing these about 3 weeks too late. You had 3 weeks, you could have got that done, unless something serious happened to your health or something, in which I'm terribly sorry. But get finished work in, everybody. Alright, last is an Anders piece here, which is, alright, cool enough. I recommend for you, because there's so many like structural kind of fundamental problems with this, you'd honestly benefit more, and you'd probably grow more from doing a lot more studies. Study masters, draw from life, paint from life, paint your friends, paint your relatives, do studies of materials, do studies of lighting, study master composition and anatomical drawings, because this just is a very like in your face flat Saturday morning sort of cartoon a feel to it about right now. There's photo textures, but then there's flat hand drawn, and I know you gave me a list down here, things you didn't get to or wanted to do, or I don't know, but it's just too disjointed and it lacks too much of the fundamentals to really go into more. And I think you just benefit more from scaling things back and practice some more simple things. Alright, now these two I kind of categorized together because I thought they fit really well in the regards that I feel very similar toward them in the scope of this challenge, and they're both very well done. Adrian, I love your work. I'm not exactly sure who this is because it's just called Ghost. again, very well done on a technical side, but they both kind of missed the mark in regards to kind of what this challenge was about. Like this skull here, this would make a badass t-shirt. This would make an awesome rock poster of sorts. It's well illustrated, but it doesn't really have that sort of narrative and drama of like ghouls and ghosts. It's just like a super close shot up of the head, right? If this was scaled way back, and you know, there's a little bit of a narrative. It's very splash type of illustration. It's very surface level in terms of like what it's about, and that's kind of what I was looking for, is having some sort of narrative going on with these illustrations. Now, Adrian, even though I grouped this here with this one, this is actually very different. The issue with this is, even though I love all of your work, it's all so grand in scope. It is so otherworldly. You really have like a niche for what you do, and you have a vision. But at the same time, kind of like it's a bit hard to tell. Sometimes it's good, anyways, to bring things back to reality just a little bit, to have that context and that narrative there. So like you have this cool little ship with an upside down jellyfish, and you have some kind of spectral fella here. Yeah, it's kind of on theme and point, but it's also just so different. It is so out there. It's very you, but it's also like, it's good to kind of bring things back in once in a while to kind of hit something that in this case what I would call marketable, whereas like you know, each H.R. Giger, right, the Aliens creator, which I'm a bet you're a huge fan of, like his work is so good, it's so unique, but it's also so exact and particular. It wouldn't have a mass market appeal, for example. And you know, he got his work doing his thing, but that's a very rare case, in that you want to kind of bring things, I recommend at least bringing things back once in a while to kind of hit the themes of the challenge if you're going to enter them. The other thing on a technical side, I'll mention for you, just continue to be, because this kind of comes up a lot with your work, is to be mindful of how you stage your images. This is so like geometrically symmetrical that it almost to a fault. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's something that I see a lot in your work, and it kind of lacks that visual depth and flow, because everything has a stage play like presentation in it. All right, so just be mindful of that. Hey guys, I don't know if I could just put it on one favorite this challenge. There are so many good ones. I love this one, Ghouls and Ghosts. Again, nobody's got names on these things. Well, some of you do. I love this one. These are probably be my two runner-ups if I'm really pegging a title on it. Anton's, your piece is fantastic as well. I just think it needs a little bit more clarity and readability in there. And I love Bijal Torrens. I'm sorry, I can't get your name right, but I absolutely love this scene. You did a great job. It's super ambitious. It's very challenging. I bet you learned a lot. And I think with a little bit of cleanup and value structure issues, like, I think it could really come together in an amazing way. Now, the next challenge is going to be called the Frozen Throne. Now, take something like from Frozen as inspiration, take the old Warcraft 3 expansion as inspiration, weave a narrative based off that theme and title. Is it a frozen world, you know, getting conquered? Is something cursed? Is something blessed with a mystical power overtaking a kingdom? Whatever it may be, come up with something, come up with an illustration, and try to show that. All right, and so that's going to be due December 30th, and you guys all have a great Christmas. Links and additional info will be on the Discord and available to anybody that's new. And yeah, link below. Take care.